So what's up, y'all? I'm back once again. It's Iskosi Umfundisi, dropping this Black history knowledge. You know what I'm saying? Things that I do. Bring it out to y'all. First of all, I'd like to give credit and thanks to my ancestors for waking me up, making this happen. And we're gonna take something straight from the ancestors right now. As you see before you, this is the Journal of Negro History, edited by the great, the Honorable Carter G. Woodson. He's the editor. Volume 7. They don't really do stuff like this no more, but we're gonna find a lot of lost historians in here that I'm gonna be ripping from and talking about, making videos about, so these ancestors won't be forgotten by the next generation. You understand? Because it's very important that we control the history of our pen, and as this media changes, we change with it and have the stuff there. Ain't nothing gonna beat the pen and paper in a book. Granted, I grant you that. But this right here, it gotta be done and it needs to be done. And in this volume, we're going to look at another historian who's not really talked about. And her name is Delilah Beasley. Many people don't know about this wonderful African queen right here. She's a great historian. She got some great works out there. One of them I got, and I didn't even know it was by her, so I'm glad I kind of ran into this. This is a forgotten historian, our queen sister, our queen ancestor, Delilah Beasley. Now, I know a lot of people might not know much about her, so I'm going to give a little quick backdrop about her, our wonderful ancestor, so we can at least know a little bit something about her. Delilah L Beasley. Delilah Leontonin Beasley, September 9th, 1867 to August 18th, 1934, was an African-American historian and a newspaper columnist for the Oakland Tribune, Oakland, California, U.S. Beasley becomes the first African-American woman to be published regularly in a major metropolitan newspaper. As a writer, Beasley had the distinction to be the first person to present a written proof of existence of California Black pioneers. In her writing, Slavery in California, 1918, and that's the one we're going to be reading right now, Slavery in California, in her classic, The Negro Trail-Blazers of California, which is I read that before, and that's pretty damn good. A pioneering network in the field of California Black history. Her journalist career spanned more than 50 years, including detailed racial problems in California and a heroic achievement by the Blacks to overcome them in the late 19th century and early 20th century. So, this is, like I said, there's a lost historian that's now found. We're going to introduce it to the public in our works, Slavery in California. Before we get started with that, we're going to pay homage to, wonderful ancestor, Beasley, Delilah Beasley, for our wonderful works in the field, and give her praise and homage that's been long overdue about the Black history of California. So without no further ado, we're going to get down to it. Slavery in California. Slavery in California prior to the Mexican War was slavery in Spanish possessions. The Spanish began with the enslavement of the Indians, and later at the advice of De La Casa, changed to that of the Negroes. And this system was first used in the West Indies and later is extended to all the other colonies. It was said about the year 1513, Cortez fitted out to Puerto Tanapaca several small vessels and provided everything required for planting the colony, and sailed north to the head of the Gulf of California, transporting 400 Spaniards and 300 Negro slaves that he assembled for that purpose. This is the first mention of Negro slavery in California. After the founding of the mission of San Carlos by the president, Father Jamero Sierra, with a community of 23 friars, we read the first interment in the cemetery was that of Ignacio Ramirez, a former mulatto slave from San Antonio, who had the money to purchase his freedom. There were a number of slaves brought from California during these periods. They came on trading ships of various expeditions, which was usually deserted after reaching the state. Hitchett is wrong. Therefore, in saying that the first slave in California was brought here in 1825, when the wife of Antonio Jose de Decat, a Spaniard, brought a slave girl named Juana, 14 years old, from Lima to San Francisco. He doubted he even was the first slave in California for the lady to express her intention to avail for the first opportunity to leave. Spain did not bother about Negro slavery in their Pacific Coast territories for nearly 200 years before coming to the Americas. She promised by the Treaty of September 30th, 1817, to abolish the slave trade. October 31st, 1820, in all Spanish territories. In 1821, however, certain northern colonies of Spain and Americas established their independence as the United States of Mexico. 3 years later, the importation of slaves from foreign countries were prohibited, and the children of slave parents were declared free. Notwithstanding, there is said considerable immigration from southern states, followed by agitation for the acquisition of Texas. In 1827, therefore, Tortilla and Texas were organized a state with a law prohibiting slavery. As this, however, did not check the immigration. President Guerrero issued a decree in 1829 abolishing slavery in Mexico, and on the occasion of the celebration of independence of Mexico in 1830, ordered a military occupation of the state to enforce anti-slavery measures. Sidebar, President Guerrero is the first black president of Mexico. That's why he done this. It's a little bit of history right there. That's why he did this decree in 1829. But the means of aggressive Southern ever enduring to extending the territory of slavery had all but won the day in Texas. In 1836, Texas declared itself a republic with a constitution permitting the introduction of slavery and the forbidding of residence of free Negroes without the consent from its Congress. Then came the Mexican War, resulting in the defeat of Mexico and the secession of the United States, a vast territory of which California was the most valuable part. It is clear, therefore, at the time, the United States government acquired territory of California from Mexico. Slavery had been abolished there nearly 20 years. The pro-slavery party, however, did not consider this action of Mexico a finality in the settlements for a slavery question in new possessions. When a bill providing for the purchase of this territory was laid before the House, David Wilmot of Pennsylvania, after consultation with other Northern Democrats, offered the following amendment. Provide that express and fundamental conditions to acquisition of any territory from the Republic of Mexico by the United States, by virtue of any treaty which may be negotiated between them, and to the use of the executive and the monies herein appropriate, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist in any part of said territory, except for crime whereof the party shall be duly convicted. So as it says again, sound like the 13th Amendment, you know what I'm saying? Only time slavery is allowed when it's in crime. This proposal was adopted by a vote of 83 to 64. The bill covering this proposal was then reported to the Senate, where it followed a heated debate which lasted to the adjournment. The proposal being killed in the midst of stormy scenes in Congress. This discussion showed that a few statesmen believed that slavery will be profitable in California. They were not unlike Daniel Webster, who, while speaking in the mission of the state of Texas, said that slavery was officially excluded from California and New Mexico by a law even superior that which admits and sanctioned it in Texas. He meant the law of nature. The physiographic conditions of the country will forever exclude African slavery there, and it need not the application of a provision. If the question was then before the Senate, he would not vote to add addition of prohibition and to reaffirm the ordinance of nature and not reenact the will of God. The coming and going of the Negro in California did not especially interest anyone until the beginning of the immigrations of the 40s. The subject of slavery in California was officially called to attention into the inhabitants through the issuance and proclamation of the commander-in-chief of the district in regard of unlawful enslaving of Indians. He was endeavoring to protect them, but they were enslaved in spite of his efforts. The legislature undertook and perpetuated this system by enacting a law permitting the enslavement of Indians. The only condition upon the master being a bond of a small sum, that he will not abuse or cruelly treat the slave. Under provision of the same law, Indians could be arrested as vagrants and sold to the highest bidder within 24 hours after arrest. And the buyer had the privilege of the labor for a period not exceeding 4 months. An Indian arrested for a violation of the law could demand a jury trial, but could not testify on his own behalf against a white person. If found guilty of any crime, he could be either imprisoned or whipped, the whip not exceeding 24 lashes. While there was a steady influx of Southerners and their Negro slaves into the territory of California after the country was taken over by the United States, then came the question to the Negro and enslavement of the Negro. The situation became serious after Congress of the United States appropriated $3 million for the purchase of the new territory. And still so after the gold was discovered there. Mexican rule ended with the secession of the territory to the United States, and yet the session after session of Congress adjourned without giving California a territorial form of government. The question of slavery in the new acquired territory divided Congress so not decided on the issue. Southern newspapers were advising for slave owners to send names and numbers of slaves they were taking to California to found a new colony. The settlers were divided. Soon, some came because they either disliked slavery or were too poor to own slaves. They recognized the possibility for making California a free state and did not care to be designated poor white trash by masters who was allowed to fill the state with Negro slaves that constitute the basis of the aristocracy like that in the South. There were other inhabitants in California at the time who, being slave owners, were Southern sympathizers. They were determined either to have slavery in California or make a desperate effort to seeing that the territory was given up as a free state. It did not require very much investigation, however, to show that the pro-slavery party was in the minority. The editor of the Californian said in May 1848 that he voiced the sentiments of the people of California, saying that slavery was neither needed nor desired there. A correspondent of this paper, hoping to hold off a section of free labor, said, if white labor is too high for agriculturists, laborers on contract may be brought from China. Referring to the proposal to make a Commonwealth a slave state, Buckley, who said, we have not heard of one of our acquaintances in this country advocating this measure, and we almost certain that is 97 to 100% of the population are opposed to it. Again, it is remarked in this paper, we have left the slave states because we did not want to bring up our family in a miserable, can't help oneself condition. And dearly as he loved the nation, the Union, he would prefer California independent than seeing her become a slave state. The lack of law and order and the fear of Southern slave owners with the hands of the Negro slaves finally led to the call of the Constitutional Convention. The question of slavery there was not so much debated in the body as expected. Some inside the pro-slavery leaders were talking of an independent Pacific Republic. The Southern faction of the convention was led by Mr. Gwynn, who afterwards became U.S. United States Senator from California, and the Northern element was ably represented by Mr. Broderick, who later was chosen state senator. The convention finally drafted their constitution with a section which provided that neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, unless for the punishment of crime, shall be ever tolerated in this state. A pro-slavery fraction in the convention was determined to have slavery somewhere and managed to have it under the eastern boundary of California, so designated that it extended as far as the Rocky Mountains. This would have resulted in rejection by Congress, or a division of the territory into North and Southern California. Given the pro-sentiment states element in a new state, the unwily boundary, however, was discovered in time to have it changed, but not until after much debate, which almost read the Constitution. California representatives elected by the convention left for Washington, where they presented to Congress the Constitution and the petition of the California settlers asking for admission as a state. There had never been a proceeding of their act. Yet the settlers in California felt perfectly justified, since their only safeguard against the pro-slavery leaders were to bring their slaves into their territory. Leaders at the national capital naturally hesitated, not knowing whether or not to admit California under the conditions thus attaining would aggravate or improve the national situation. California, however, cared little about the national situation, as it attested to resolutions of the 1850 to the effect that any attempts by Congress to interfere with the institution of slavery in any territory of the United States would create just grounds of alarm in many states and of the Union, and such interference is unnecessary and unnecessary and a violation of good faith, since when any such territory applied to the admission into the Union as a state. The people therefore alone have the right and should be left free, unrestrained, to decide such question for themselves. Robert moved to the insertion of the following: the opposition of the admission of a state into a union with a constitution prohibiting slavery. On account of such prohibition is a policy unwholly justified, unstatesmanlike, and in violation of the spirits of concessions and compromise by which alone the federal constitution was adopted and by which alone can be perpetuated. This amendment was adopted. After the debate for 4 months, Congress admitted California as a free state as one of its 5 compromises. Jefferson Davis, the future president of the Confederacy, however, repeated the ideas and advantages to this section. He said, where is the concession to the South? Is it an admission of a state as a state of California from which has been excluded from congressional agitation? Is it an announcement that slavery does not and is not to exist in the remaining territories of New Mexico and California. Isn't it denying the title of Texas to one half a part of her territory? He held that the gold washing and the mining was particularly adapted to slave labor as agriculture and depended on irrigation. The day after the admission of certain southern state senators sent the body to protest against the injustice of the Act of Congress admitting California as a free state. The Senate refused the clerk permission to either read it or record it, whereupon the newspaper publishing articles of severe criticism talk of dividing the Union. Jefferson Davis went before the United States Senate and addressed it, calling attention to these comments, adding that so much outside criticism was doing more to divide the Union than the protest could possibly do. Congress finally voted that the protest be recorded. Was it to be a free state in the sense of the word? This was the day when slave power was covertly grasping at Spanish-speaking countries beyond the Rio Grande, as it had the lands beyond the Sabine. At first, it was not, for many good slaves were brought here into the state. On April 1st, 1850, an advertisement appeared in the Jackson Mississippian referring to California, the southern slave colony, and inviting the citizens of slaveholding states wishing to go to California to send their names, the number of slaves, and times of contemplated departure, etc., to the southern slave colony of Jackson, Mississippi. The design was to settle in the richest parts of the states and to secure an uninterrupted enjoyment of slave property. The colony was comprised of 5,000 white persons and 10,000 slaves. Another effort to extend slavery in this section came in an unsuccessful filibustering expedition of Tennessee lawyer William Walker, who undertook to establish to the south of Sonora a state with a constitution like that of Louisiana, asking his advocacy for slavery on the lofty grounds of civilizing blacks and liberating whites from manual labor. To explain the meaning of this expedition, one can consider it sufficient to point out that Jefferson Davis was the Secretary of War at the time and that the gas and purchase was under his consideration. In 1852, Peachy of San Joaquin introduced a resolution to allow 50 Southern families to immigrate into California with their slaves. Some of them came without permission, but on finding that they could not legally hold their slaves, they sent them part of them back, while others became free. In 1852, the legislature passed a fugitive slave law, extending the bar from slavery. The mischievous clause of this measure was that all slaves had escaped into or brought into California previous to the admission of the State of the Union were to be held as fugitives and liable to arrest under the law, although many of them had been in state for several years, during which the accumulation of considerable property. The pro-slavery element not only profited by this, but the interpretation of the law by many judges enabled them to bring their slaves into the state, work them in the mines, and return south and back to slavery with their Negroes. They did not wish for the trouble to return the passage. They auctioned them off to the highest bidder. It is also enabled them to make fortunes by selling their slaves there to their freedom, charging them twice and often 3 times the price they gave her brought on the other side of the Rocky Mountains. In certain southern counties of the state, it was unpopular to speak on behalf of the state slaves. In 1855, Chase and Day, 2 bishops of Alameda County, were ridden on a rail and ducked and otherwise maltreated. That same year, expired the fugitive slave law, which had been renewed from year to year to enable slave owners to reclaim the fugitives who had sought refuge in the state prior to their admission to the Union. Fearing that this night might be followed by other legislation and hostile to their class, the Negroes had a convention in San Francisco that year to discuss their right and their treatment by white people, politics principles, and the necessity of education. The fugitive slave law was not reenacted. Many slaves, however, asserted their rights, such as one is the case of Archie, a slave brought by one Charles Stovall from Mississippi to California in 1857. After hiring Archie out for some time, Stovall undertook to return him to Mississippi. Archie escaped and was arrested as a fugitive slave. Stovall sued out for a writ of a habeas corpus for possession, and the case came before the Supreme Court for adjudication. Peter Burnett, former governor, who had been appointed justice of the court by Governor Johnson in 1857, filled that office until 1858 and presided. As Burnett was a Southern man, his decision was foreshadowed. He decided that although Stovall could not sustain the character of either a transit traveler or a visitor under the general law, was not entitled to Archie, but yet held that there was circumstances connected with this particular case that might exempt him from the operation of the rules laid down. One of the circumstances was that Stovall was traveling for his health, another that he was short of means upon arrival, and still another that this was his first case of his kind. He therefore ordered Archie to be turned over to Stovall. Joseph G. Baldwin, who had succeeded Barnett, characterized the decision as giving the law to the north and the Negro to the south. After being delivered to Stovall, Archie was taken to San Francisco, but his friends there sued out of a written habeas corpus for his liberation before Judge Thomas W. Freelon of the county of San Francisco. While this case was pending, however, Stovall swore a new affidavit that Archie escaped from him in Mississippi and procured a warrant from George Penn Johnson, United States Commissioner, for his arrest of a fugitive slave in Mississippi. Archie was then immediately discharged by Judge Freelon. He was immediately rearrested and taken before George Penn Johnson, who decided Archie was in no sense a fugitive slave from Mississippi and discharged him. The tendency to free Negroes brought there checked the importation of that class. The rights of the master to his slave, however, was not easily relinquished, and the institution of slavery in California did not come to an end until 1872. Let me read that one more again. The tendency to free Negroes brought there a check of importation of that class. The rights of the master to his slaves, however, was not easily relinquished, and the institution of slavery in California did not enter 1872. Freedom, however, had to win and pro-slavery element to change its policy. In 1856 to 1857, efforts were made to call a convention to change the Constitution so that it permitted importation of slaves for the experiment of the Fugitive Slave Law in 1855. Slave owners who held millions often had returned them to the slave states or let them go free. Since the Negroes brought to the state could most easily become cases for free, the pro-slavery party then sought to get rid of the free Negro. In his message to the legislature in 1850, Governor Burnett recommended exclusion of all free Negroes. This was always Burnett's hobby. He incorporated this into the law of Oregon. Okay, that's what's up. He incorporated it into the laws of Oregon when he revised them in 1844. Burnett has been brought up in the South, and although he has ceased to be a slaveholder, he cannot think of living with Negroes as free men. The exclusion of the blacks, too, had a sort of popular appeal in it. The legislature, however, was divided on the question as what should be done with the free Negro. A bill in compromise with the wishes of the governor was introduced but defeated. Undaunted by this, however, the enemy of the free Negroes won a victory in according and enacting a law that no black or mulatto or Indian should be permitted to give in evidence any action into which a white person was party. The leaders of the Negroes held another convention in 1856 to protest against this law. Another bill providing for the prohibition of immigration of free persons of color into the state was introduced in 1858, and after much debate through both houses, it never became law. The Black Code, of course, was abrogated after the Civil War. So California did have a Black Code too. Delilah Beasley. It's the ancestor, wonderful ancestor Delilah Beasley coming off. I wanted to read the little things in the middle here, such as this. In some cases are more interesting. Daniel Rodgers came across the plain with his master from Little Rock, Arkansas, and worked in the mines of Sonora, California. During the day for his master and at night for himself, earning and paying his master $11,000 for his freedom. Soon afterwards, the master returned with him to Little Rock, Arkansas, and sold him. A number of leading white gentlemen in Little Rock raised a sum of money and paid for his freedom and set him free. William Pollock and his wife from North Carolina came to California with their master, who located at Cold Springs, Kahoma, California. He paid $1,000 for himself and $800 for his wife. The money was earned by washing for the miners at night and making donuts. They moved to Placerville, California, and soon after were earning a living as caterers. In 1849, a slaveholder brought the slaves to California. Not wishing to take the Negro back to his native state, Alabama, he concluded to sell him by auction. The advertisement was put in the paper. The boy was purchased for $1,000 by K.T. Fry, a strong abolitionist who gave the boy his freedom. A Mississippi slaveholder brought several slaves from the state and promised to give them freedom in 2 years. They all ran away except for one, Charles Bates, when they learned that they was already free. The owner, fine minded, did not pay and started east, taking Charles with him. On the Isthmus of Panama, Charles was persuaded to leave his master. He returned to California and to Stockton with his true friend. On the streets one day, he was recognized by a party who lent money to Charles Masters. The debtor got out an attachment for the former slave as chattel property, and according to state law, the nigger was put up and sold at auction. A number of anti-slavery men brought the boy for $750, and gave him his freedom. California Reports, pages 424 to 426. So she got a lot of deep work on the slavery, that was popping off in California. We got an unsolved ancestor, unknown. I'm going to read this part too, and we're going to close it on out. Many Negroes returned to slavery by the courts, and the owners of the slaves in Mississippi brought them voluntarily in California before the adoption of the Constitution by the state. The slaves asserted their freedom and for some months were engaged in business for themselves. The owner, under the provision of the Slave Acts of 1952, brought them before the Justice of Peace and was allowed to claim the owners and order them into his custody. The slave petitioned for a writ of habeas corpus, which came before the Supreme Court, and after the case, the court ordered that the writ be dismissed and the slaves remanded to their owner. California Reports, number 2, pages 424 to 426. In the case of Alvin Coffey, is equally interesting. This account was given by a lifelong friend of the subject. Alvin Coffey was born in 1822 in St. Louis, Missouri. He came to California with his sick master, Mr. Duvall, who landed on San Francisco September 1st, 1849. They went to Sacramento, October 13, 1849. The next 8 months, the slave earned for his master $5,000, working for the mine and watching for the miners and mining for himself at night. He earned $700 of his own. As his master continued poor health, he decided to return with Calvin to Missouri at the expiration of 2 years. When they reached Kansas City, Missouri, the master sold Alvin to Nelson Tyndall, first taking him from $5,000 earned for the master and also $700 he earned for himself. Nelson Tyndall took a great liking to Alvin and in a short time made him overseer of a number of slaves. Alvin, however, longed to go back to California. In order to earn his freedom, he brought his time from his master and took contracts to build railroads. One day, Nelson Tyndall said to Alvin that he was too smart of a man to be a slave and ought to try to purchase himself freedom. Whereupon Alvin told him that he would let him turn to California. He could easily earn enough money to effect the purchase. Alvin was permitted to return to California. In a short time, he sent his master $1,500 to pay for his freedom. Alvin then undertook the earning to pay for his freedom of his wife and his daughters, who was slave of Dr. Bassett of Missouri. He earned a required sum in return for his family. After paying for their freedom, he went with them to Canada, where he left his daughters to be educated. He and his wife, Manero, came to California, and the cost of their freedom and himself and his family, together with the trips to and from California, was about $7,000. See History of California, book number 4, page 382. So this is how the stuff was going down, As I said before, thank our long-lost ancestor, Delilah, the Queen Delilah, who was doing this, who was, putting this history on out there for us so we can remember it. And we're going to ride on out through history, So Delilah Beasley, from Cincinnati, Ohio, where the California resident is a plaque out there in Oakland, California, dedicated to her for the Black History of California. And this is Iskosi Umfundisi saying, keep your head on the swivel and love the history of your people.